Bring in very distinguished guest joining us now, Ohio Senator Rob Portman. First of all, Rob, thank you for coming on. I know you had to make some sacrifices. We appreciate it very much. But look, I'm just trying to say, and I'm going to turn this over to you. I am very glad the Bidens hammered Cuban communism. I'm proud of them for doing that. They got around to it. This is not communism here. Bernie Sanders and them not communists. But this is the biggest central planning, regulatory, spending, taxing plan we've ever seen. It's outside the boundaries of, I think, the American economic and political experience, and it will do great harm. That's all I'm saying. Let me have your take, because you're one of the leaders on the floor of the Senate. What you think?
Well, Larry, first of all, you've proven again this afternoon that you don't just play an economist on TV. You actually understand the economy and what the impacts are going to be. And let's face it, I heard John Martha McCallum earlier on Fox where you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But we went into this pandemic with an incredibly strong economy, and it was an opportunity economy. So you talked earlier about the notion in America is that you have opportunity at the starting line. And that's exactly what we were providing. So you not only had economic growth that was strong, you had wage increases of over 3% for 19 straight months as of February of 2020. And those wage increases were mostly going to middle income and lower income workers. I mean, it was amazing. And you had the lowest poverty rate in the history of the country since it started to be calculated back in the late 1950s. And you had low unemployment, historically low for certain groups, blacks, Hispanics, but low unemployment overall, 50-year low. So this was the opportunity economy we all hoped for, and the tax relief, the tax cuts, the regulatory reform, the international trade side, everything was working to try to get us to a point where we could not just have a strong economy, we were lifting people up and bringing them in from the sidelines into our economy. I just got a report from CBO, you probably saw it about a week ago, saying that guess what? The income is actually, for the federal government, the revenues is going to be higher over the next year and 2 years than projected. In fact, 10% higher. That's a significant growth, as you know, from your time at the Office of Management and Budget. Why? Because it's working. The tax reform is still working, as are the other aspects of the economic plan that you helped engineer. So this is not the time to do this massive tax increase. I agree with you about the spending side. I think it puts us in a position where it's harder to have that entrepreneurial spirit in the sense that you have opportunity at the starting line, as we said. But it's the taxes that concern me just as much, because this would be the highest tax increase in the history of our country in order to pay for the $350 trillion at a time when we are coming out of this global pandemic with a strong demand. I mean, the demand side's fine. It's the supply side that's hurting. I will distinguish, if I could, Larry, and I've talked about this, the infrastructure package from the so-called reconciliation $3.5 trillion. Infrastructure spending is not going to be spent this year. It's not going to be spent next year. It's long-term spending for capital assets. It's a little like CapEx if you're in business, which typically you would borrow for. And this will actually help make the economy more efficient and more productive. Therefore, according to the CBO, according to two economists who wrote about it today, who I don't know you respect, Doug Holkekin and then Mike Strain over at AEI, this is actually going to add more on the supply side and actually put more revenue back into the economy over time. It should be paid for, in my view, without tax increases. But it's a different kind of spending. I just wanted to distinguish those two. But in terms of the $3.5 trillion, this is social spending that's going to start right away and will have a negative impact on the economy because it will add more demand on the demand side, putting more money out there in order to stimulate the economy. It does not need stimulation right now. We need more on the supply side, which is the building and the jobs and so on that will come from the
which will be choked off by these taxes. That's the thing. I don't know why it's so hard to understand, and history proves it. And you've got, you talk about the CBO. Look, you were on this show, I don't know, a while back, and you were quoting a CBO study about the impact of corporate taxes. 70% of the burden of corporate taxes paid for by the middle class, the blue-collar middle class. That's the CBO.
Wages and benefits of workers.
Precisely.
Yeah, nonpartisan CBO. They're hardly a conservative group, but they get it. You can't just raise the taxes the Democrats want to raise, and you'll see this start to play out as this $3.5 trillion bill becomes, more a reality as they look at getting the votes for it. You'll start to see that it is chock full of taxes, including taxes on those working families in Ohio and around the country.
Yeah, some of them, by the way, made in Europe by the G20, which I think is totally inappropriate. But Senator, let me just walk through this. There's a lot of new entitlements here that will be permanent. I mean, I'm just looking at a list from various things I read and people I talk to. Universal pre-K, more expanded child care. None of this has work requirements. None of this has employment incentives. Free community college, paid family leave, paid medical leave, affordable housing. I don't know what that means. There's a housing boom going on and prices are soaring. Then they want to expand Medicare. They want to expand Medicaid. And I reckon when they get around to it, there's going to be big drug price controls. We can't afford this stuff, Senator Portman.
Yeah, it's a real problem. And healthcare costs are already too high. There's nothing in there, as far as I'm told, that would reduce the costs of healthcare. Instead, it expands healthcare, and particularly moving us toward a single-payer type program, which of course is what Bernie Sanders, my colleague from Vermont, has fought for years, and he's the chair of the Budget Committee. So understand he's very pleased with the expansion of Medicaid and Medicare, and moving toward a system where the government sets the prices. And that's not going to make our healthcare system better. More transparency would, and more competition, and therefore pressure on getting prices down. That would help the economy and help families in Ohio be able to afford healthcare.
And last point, Senator. There's a lot of Green New Deal in here, okay? And this has to be parsed through details and accounting. I mean, there may even be carbon-related tariffs on both sides of the pond. There's discussion in Europe and there's discussion here. But I'm just going to read off from what I can gather. You may know a whole lot more than I do. You've got methane reduction fees. You've got something called a Clean Electricity Standard, CES. You've got tax credits for clean energy, which could mean anything. Tax credits for electric vehicles, which are very expensive. You've got Civilian Climate Corps, something new. A green bank, something new. As I said, tariffs, pollution import fees, carbon border adjustments, and then electric power distribution is going to be provided with either taxing or financial incentives. This is a whole other planned economy, Senator Portman. In the name of the Green New Deal, in the name of climate change, this is a planned economy. And we don't know much about this. And they're going to rush into it pell-mell, and I fear it will do enormous damage to everything.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Larry. And let's look at what's happened over the past couple decades. America's emissions are actually down. We've reduced our CO2 emissions, not by a mandate from the federal government, by more efficient energy use, and specifically natural gas, which has been a great boon to our economy, but also reduced emissions. At the same time, as an example, China's emissions over the past 3 decades have tripled, to the point that China now has almost 3 times the CO2 emissions that the United States of America does. So you recall not long ago, the U.S. was leading in CO2 emissions according to all the studies. Now we're actually making progress, not by joining any accords, not by the mandates, but by allowing the market to work. So one thing I do worry about, I haven't seen the details yet because they haven't put them out, but I wouldn't be surprised if everything you listed is there and perhaps more. But it's this general notion that the government ought to be stepping in and providing these mandates rather than providing incentives, which have worked. And so I'm concerned, as we all are, to have a clean environment and clean air, and we want to see the emissions be reduced. But let's do it through market forces that doesn't hurt the people I represent, because you're going to see people's electricity costs, their utility bills go up dramatically. You're going to see industries, including in places like Ohio, where we do have heavy industry still, and we do still rely on fossil fuels, be at a disadvantage. So let's use the technology that we have, develop new technologies, and use the market. And we can make progress. We've shown that over the past couple decades in this country.
Free enterprise, markets, Reagan, Laffer, Kudlow, Portman, we believe in rewarding success, not punishing. I think this works. This woke stuff, Rob, it wants to punish, and then it wants to plan and mandate, and I don't like it. I don't have a good feeling about this at all. I don't want America to decline. I want America to go up. I know you do too. Listen, I know you're
America to lead, Larry. We are still that beacon of hope and opportunity for the rest of the world. You see what's happening in Cuba today and around the world, where people still look to us as a democracy that is prosperous and free. And that's something that we owe to the rest of the world to continue to provide that beacon and not to move toward a socialist system where, frankly, there's been a lot of failure to help the very people they say they want to help.
Senator Portman, thank you. Safe travels.
Thanks,
Appreciate you coming on very, very much.
Take care.
Talk
You
soon.
bet.